It was the day of the talent show, and Lila sat nervously at a grand piano in the small school auditorium. She had never been this nervous in her life. Her fingers hovered above the keys, shaking slightly. The room was filled with whispers and laughter, and Lila couldn't help but feel like everyone was looking at her, waiting for her to fail. Lila was a shy black girl, and she often felt like she didn't fit in with the other kids. Today was no different. The teacher, Mrs. Adams, had suggested she play piano for the class as part of the talent show, but Lila knew the real reason. It wasn't because Mrs. Adams thought she could play well. It was because the other kids wanted to see her fail. Lila glanced around the room. Some of the students were whispering to each other, giggling. A few of them were even pointing at her, making fun of her. She could hear bits of their conversations. "She won't be able to play anything good," one girl whispered. "Yeah, she's probably going to mess up." "Watch," said a boy sitting in the front row. Lila's heart sank. She had tried to ignore the whispers, but it was hard. She had practiced for weeks, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this was a setup. She wasn't like the other kids in the class. They didn't understand her. They didn't know what it was like to be laughed at for being different. But this was her chance to show them. She had to prove them wrong. She had to show them who she was. Her teacher, Mrs. Adams, gave her a bored look from the front of the room. Mrs. Adams wasn't known for being kind or supportive. In fact, she often picked on Lila for being quiet and shy. "Well, Lila," Mrs. Adams said with a smirk, "let's see if you can actually play something good. If not, maybe it's better if you stop." The words stung, but Lila didn't let them get to her. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She had made a promise to her grandmother before she passed away. "When the world doubts you, show them who you really are," her grandmother had said. Lila could hear her grandmother's voice in her head now, reminding her to stay strong. Lila's fingers finally touched the cold keys of the piano. She had to push through. She had to show everyone that she wasn't just the quiet girl they thought they knew. She was capable of more. She began to play a simple melody, just the first few notes, but the whispers in the room didn't stop. They only grew louder. "Look at her," one of the boys said. "She's playing so slowly she doesn't even know what she's doing." Lila's hands trembled as she played, but she refused to stop. She looked down at the piano keys, focusing on each note. She couldn't let them see her fear. She couldn't let them win, but then she heard it. A loud, snickering laugh from the back of the room. "She can't even play a song right," another student laughed. "Why even try?" Lila's heart dropped. She was ready to give up. Maybe they were right. Maybe she wasn't good enough. She wanted to stop, to run out of the room and never play again. But then she remembered her grandmother's words once more. "Show them who you really are." With a deep breath, Lila pushed through the doubts swirling in her mind. Her fingers pressed harder on the keys, and slowly the melody grew. She played with more confidence now, allowing the music to flow from her heart. Every note was a message that told the world she wouldn't be defined by their doubts. She wouldn't let them push her down. And then, just when it seemed like the room couldn't get any more tense, something changed. The music started to fill the room, growing richer, more beautiful. Lila's hands moved with ease, the notes blending together like a story being told. She was lost in the music now, lost in the rhythm of the keys, the one place where she felt at home. The whispers in the room began to die down. The snickers faded away, replaced by silence. Even Mrs. Adams, who had been watching her with skepticism, was no longer rolling her eyes. Her expression was different now, uncertain but curious. Lila kept playing, pouring everything she had into the music. She could feel the energy in the room change, the atmosphere shift. No one was laughing anymore. They were listening. She could hear the silence in the room as her fingers danced across the keys, creating a melody that was unlike anything she had ever played before. It was simple, yet powerful, delicate, yet bold. It was everything Lila had hoped to show the world. The music wasn't just a performance, it was a statement. Then, as she hit a final, powerful note, the room remained still. For a moment, everything was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the music had left everyone breathless. Lila's fingers froze on the keys. She didn't dare look up. She was afraid of what they would say next. Would they mock her? Again? Would they laugh at her for trying? But the silence stretched on. And just when Lila was about to pull her hands away from the piano, she heard something. It was faint at first, but it grew louder. A slow clap. It came from the back of the room, and then another clap, then more. Soon, the entire class was clapping. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She slowly looked up, surprised to see her classmates standing, applauding her. They were no longer laughing. They were amazed. Even Mrs. Adams stood there, her mouth slightly open, staring at Lila with an expression of shock and admiration. Lila smiled, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over her. For the first time in her life, she had shown the world who she really was, and it was more than enough. The applause echoed through the room, filling the space with a sound Lila had never heard before. Her heart raced as she slowly lifted her hands from the piano, the last note still lingering in the air. Her classmates were standing now, clapping loudly, some even cheering. It was like a dream. She had never imagined they would react like this. Lila looked up, her eyes scanning. The room, the faces that had once mocked her now showed a mixture of surprise, admiration, and even respect. The whispers had stopped, replaced with admiration she never thought she would receive. She couldn't believe it. After all the hurtful words, all the teasing and the doubt they had thrown her way, they were applauding her. Mrs. Adams, who had once seemed so dismissive of her, was standing in the front of the room with her hands clapping. Her face was flushed with surprise, her expression shifting from disbelief to something else, something softer, almost apologetic. Lila couldn't help but smile, a small, shy smile that she had never dared to show before. But even as her classmates celebrated, a part of her was still unsure. Was this real? Did they truly understand her, or were they just caught up in the moment? As she looked around, she noticed something. A few of her classmates who had laughed and whispered earlier were no longer looking at her with judgment. Instead, they were offering nods of respect. It was like they were seeing her for the first time. One of the girls who had once snickered at Lila stepped forward. She was tall, with long blonde hair and a bright, confident smile. "Lila," she said, her voice softer than it had ever been before. "That was amazing. I didn't know you could play like that. I'm really sorry for the way I treated you." The apology caught Lila off guard. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had always kept to herself, avoiding conflict, but now, in the face of this unexpected kindness, she felt a shift within her. "Thank you," Lila whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure what else to say. It wasn't every day someone apologized for mocking you, but in this moment, it felt like something had changed in the room. Lila stood there for a moment, letting the applause wash over her. And then Mrs. Adams stepped forward, breaking the silence. Her usual stern demeanor had softened. "Well, Lila," Mrs. Adams said, her voice filled with an unfamiliar warmth. "You've certainly proven me wrong. That was an impressive performance. I apologize for doubting you." Lila felt a wave of emotions crash over her. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Mrs. Adams had always been the teacher who barely noticed her, the one who seemed to favor the louder, more outgoing students. But now, Mrs. Adams was looking at her with a kind of respect Lila had never experienced before. "I think it's time we give everyone a lesson," Mrs. Adams continued, her eyes still locked on Lila, not just in music but in understanding. Lila's heart skipped a beat. What did Mrs. Adams mean by that? Was she going to make a bigger point out of this? Lila wasn't sure what was coming, but she knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about her performance anymore, it was about breaking through barriers that had been built over time. The applause started to die down, but Lila could still feel the heat of everyone's gaze on her. She wasn't sure how to process all of this. One part of her felt nervous, as if she might wake up from a dream. But another part of her felt proud, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She had done it. She had shown them. And now, for the first time, she felt like she was part of the world around her. Mrs. Adams nodded toward the piano, signaling to Lila to return to her seat. As she did, the room remained still, almost reverent. The students who had once been skeptical or cruel were now watching her closely, as if seeing her for the first time. But before Lila could sit down, Mrs. Adams addressed the class once more. "I want everyone to think about what just happened," Mrs. Adams said, her voice steady and serious. "We've witnessed something powerful today. Not just the music, but the courage it took for Lila to stand up in front of all of us, to face her fears and show us who she really is. That's what real strength looks like." Lila's heart swelled. She wasn't sure if she was more amazed by the music she had played or the way Mrs. Adams had spoken. It felt like a lesson in life, not just piano. Mrs. Adams looked around the room. "Next time we feel tempted to judge someone, remember Lila's performance. Remember that there's more to people than meets the eye. And most importantly, never assume that someone doesn't have the strength to do something great just because they don't show it on the surface." Lila felt her cheeks flush with warmth, but she also felt something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. For the first time, the classroom felt like a place she belonged. The classmates who had mocked her before were now quiet, reflective, and thoughtful. They had witnessed a moment of change, not just for Lila, but for all of them. As she sat back down, Lila allowed herself a small smile. She had done it. She had played her heart out, and now she had their respect. But she knew this was just the beginning. She was no longer the shy, quiet girl who could be pushed around. She had shown them who she truly was, and no one would ever forget that. The days following Lila's performance were different. When she walked into school the next morning, she was met with nods of recognition and quiet whispers, but these weren't the same kind of whispers as before. These whispers were filled with respect, admiration, and curiosity. Lila noticed the change immediately. The students who had once ignored her or made fun of her now greeted her with friendly smiles. Even the teachers seemed to treat her with more attention. It was as if they were seeing her for the first time. But the biggest change was with Mrs. Adams. Every time Lila saw her, the teacher's expression seemed warmer, more genuine. There were no more snide remarks or dismissive comments. Mrs. Adams even started acknowledging Lila's ideas in class. Lila wasn't sure how to handle it all. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, and now suddenly she was the center of attention. At first it made her nervous. She wasn't used to being seen, especially not like this. One morning after class, Mrs. Adams asked Lila to stay behind. Lila's heart skipped a beat. What did she want? Had she made a mistake? Was she going to go back to being her old, dismissive self? "Lila," Mrs. Adams said softly, "I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of you. What you did that day wasn't just about playing the piano. You showed courage, and that's something most people can only dream of." Lila was taken aback. She had never heard those words from Mrs. Adams before. The teacher had always been hard on her, sometimes even cold, but now there was genuine warmth in her eyes. "Thank you," Lila whispered, unsure of what to say next. She was still processing everything that had happened. "I'd like to offer you something," Mrs. Adams continued, looking thoughtful. "There's an opening for the lead role in the school's music recital. I think you're more than capable of taking it." Lila's eyes widened. The lead role. Was she really ready for that? A part of her felt excited, but another part of her was scared. What if she wasn't good enough? What if they were only choosing her because of her performance that day? I don't know," Lila stammered. "I've never done anything like that before." Mrs. Adams smiled. "I know you haven't, but I believe in you, Lila. You've already proven that you have the heart and the talent. Now it's your chance to show everyone what you can really do." The offer sat in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Lila wasn't sure if she was ready for the spotlight, but for the first time, She felt like she might be able to handle it. She had come so far already. Maybe this was the next step. Later that day, during lunch, a group of students approached her. It was the same group of girls who had once laughed at her, the ones who had thought she was just some quiet girl who couldn't do anything special. One of the girls, Emma, stepped forward. She looked at Lila, her eyes filled with something that Lila couldn't quite place. "Lila," Emma began, her voice softer than usual, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for the way we treated you. I never realized how amazing you were until that day. That was incredible." Lila blinked, taken aback by the sincerity in Emma's voice. She had never expected an apology, especially not from Emma. "Thank you," Lila said quietly, feeling a mix of emotions. She wasn't used to receiving apologies, and especially not from people who had made her life difficult. "It's just," Emma continued, hesitating, "you've changed. You've shown us all that we don't know everything. We judged you without ever giving you a chance, and now we all want to support you." Lila's heart swelled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. To be accepted, to be seen as something more than just the shy, quiet girl. It felt like a dream. The rest of the girls nodded in agreement. They all apologized one by one and offered their support. Lila wasn't sure how to react. She had spent so long being invisible, never expecting anyone to care. And now, here they were, offering her their respect. "I think you've earned something," Emma said with a smile. "You deserve to be in the spotlight." Lila felt the weight of their words. It was more than just the words themselves. It was the change in how they saw her. She wasn't just the girl who played the piano anymore. She was someone who had shown strength, someone who had surprised them all. And in that moment, she realized something important. She was capable of so much more than she had ever believed. Later that evening, Lila sat at her piano again, her fingers hovering above the keys. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she could face whatever came next. The doubts that had once held her back were gone, replaced by the belief that she could achieve anything. The next day, she accepted Mrs. Adams' offer to take the lead role in the recital. She wasn't sure what the performance would bring, but one thing was clear. She was ready. Ready to show everyone who she really was. Ready to prove that the shy girl who had been mocked and underestimated had the power to change everything. The days leading up to the school's music recital were filled with both excitement and pressure for Lila. Every time she walked into the music room, her nerves would start to flare up. The stage was so much bigger than just the school auditorium. It was the place where she would show everyone who she truly was. Mrs. Adams had been pushing her to practice even harder. Each day after school, she would stay for hours, perfecting every note, every movement. The melody that she had started to play in the talent show now felt like a part of her. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was her story. And she had to make sure that story was told perfectly. But the pressure was weighing on her. She was still that shy girl deep down, and it felt like all eyes were on her, waiting for her to mess up. What if she couldn't deliver? What if the applause she had received was just a fluke? During one rehearsal, Lila's fingers stumbled over the keys, breaking the flow of the music. She stopped immediately, frustrated. Mrs. Adams, who had been standing off to the side, walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, Lila. You're not just playing notes, you're telling a story. Don't think of it as a performance. Just let the music flow." Lila nodded, trying to calm the storm of nerves inside her. But she couldn't help but feel the weight of everyone's expectations. That afternoon, the other students came in for their final rehearsals, and Lila could feel their eyes on her. The whispers started again. This time, though, it wasn't mockery. They were whispering out of awe and curiosity. "Did you hear? She's the one who played that incredible song during the talent show. She's amazing. I can't believe we didn't notice her before." Lila felt a lump in her throat. She had never been the center of attention before, and it was overwhelming. But as she closed her eyes, she remembered her grandmother's words, "When the world doubts you, show them who you really are." With renewed determination, Lila sat at The piano once again, her fingers finding their place on the keys. The music began to flow more freely now. With every note, she let go of the fear, the doubt, and the insecurities. She played with everything she had, her soul, her heart, her past and her future. It wasn't just a song anymore, it was her life in melody. The rehearsal continued with more precision, and by the end of the day, Lila had the entire piece memorized. She was still nervous, but there was something different in the way she carried herself now. She wasn't just playing for approval anymore. She was playing because the music was a part of her. It had become her voice, and it was time to speak. When she left the rehearsal room that afternoon, her classmates gave her silent nods of approval. Lila didn't feel the need to speak to them. She had nothing to prove anymore. The music had done the talking for her. But there was one more thing she had to do. She had to prove it to herself. The night of the recital arrived, and the entire school was buzzing with excitement. The auditorium was packed, with students, teachers, and parents filling every seat. Lila could hear the chatter from the crowd, the soft rustling of programs being opened, but it all felt like a distant hum in her ears. She stood backstage, hidden behind the heavy curtain, staring at the grand piano on stage. Her heart pounded in her chest, her palms sweaty. She could hear the other students performing, each one trying to outdo the last. But all Lila could focus. Doon was the voice in her head that told her she wasn't good enough. What if she failed? What if her hands betrayed her, like they almost had in practice? Then just before she was called on stage, a familiar voice broke through her anxiety. "You've got this, Lila," Mrs. Adams said quietly, standing beside. "Hyun, remember, this is your moment. Don't just play the notes, tell your story." Lila took a deep breath. She had spent so many years being quiet, trying to stay unnoticed. But tonight was different. Tonight she wasn't just the shy girl. In the back of the class, she was the one with the music that could speak louder than words. When the announcer called her name, Lila's legs felt like lead as she made her way to the stage. The spotlight was blinding, the audience's eyes focused on her. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. She thought she might faint, but then she sat down at the piano, feeling the cool keys beneath her fingers. The instant her hands touched the instrument, everything else faded away. The nerves, the doubts, the crowd, none of it mattered anymore. It was just her and the music. She started playing. The first few notes were soft, delicate, almost hesitant. But as the melody grew, so did her confidence. The notes flowed more easily now, weaving together in a beautiful, complex tapestry of sound. She felt the music deep inside, guiding her fingers. It was more than just a song, it was a piece of her soul. As Lila played, she began to lose herself in the music, her fingers moving with grace and power. The whispers that once surrounded her seemed to dissolve, replaced by a stillness that filled the room. Every note she played seemed to captivate the audience, drawing them in closer. The music built to a crescendo, and as Lila reached the final few bars, she could see the reactions of the audience. Wide eyes, open mouths, and stunned silence. The piano keys seemed to vibrate with emotion as she played the last note, letting it hang in the air. For a moment, there was only silence. The entire auditorium was frozen, as if they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started as a few claps, but soon the entire audience erupted into thunderous applause. Lila stood up, her heart racing, her face flushed with a mix of disbelief and joy. She had done it. She had shown them who she really was. As she left the stage, the students who had once mocked her were now looking at her with awe. Some of them even came up to her, apologizing for the way they had treated her. "You were amazing," one of the boys said, a look of admiration in his eyes. Lila smiled shyly, but deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. She had proven something to herself tonight. She was more than the whispers and the doubts. She was a force, and nothing could take that away from her. Lila walked off the stage, her head spinning, her heart still racing. The applause was deafening, echoing in her ears. She didn't know how to react. Her body felt numb, as if she were floating. But inside, she was filled with something new. Pride. She had just done something she never thought was possible. She had silenced all the doubt, all the mockery, and had let her music do the talking. Backstage, her classmates gathered around her. The same students who had once whispered behind her back now stood with wide eyes, looking at her as if they were seeing her for the first time. They had witnessed something incredible, something that went far beyond just a piano performance. "Lila, that was unbelievable," one of the girls said, her voice filled with awe. Another student nodded. "I didn't know you could play like that. You should have been in the talent show last year." Lila smiled shyly but didn't speak. She wasn't sure what to say. Her hands, still trembling from the performance, were clasped together in front of her. Her heart was still racing, and she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. As she made her way to the back of the auditorium, Mrs. Adams was waiting for her. The teacher's face lit up when she saw Lila. "You did it," Mrs. Adams said, her voice full of pride. "You showed them all. I'm so proud of you." Lila's eyes began to well up with tears. For the first time in her life, someone had truly believed in her. Not just because she could play, but because they saw her for who she was, not the shy girl in the corner, but a young woman capable of greatness. The applause didn't stop until everyone in the room had given Lila a standing ovation. The sound was overwhelming, but Lila stood tall, letting it wash over her. She deserved it. The journey from being ridiculed to being celebrated was more than just a victory. It was proof that she could rise above anything. As she stepped outside the auditorium into the cool evening air, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "When the world doubts you, show them who you really are." Lila had done that, and now she knew nothing could hold her back. The world was finally beginning to see her, and she was just getting started. The final image shows Lila standing, tall, smiling gently, as the night sky stretches above her, filled with endless possibilities.